look who's joining me at the desk. David Baker, 2020 Super Contest champion, and a man that makes his living playing poker, and a man that does a very good job of making a living on that front as well. David, always great to have you aboard. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for having me.
And David, we saw a interesting week 3. I think we both agree. Not quite as rambunctious as week 1 and week 2, but I thought that there were some very fascinating games. And just one of my biggest takeaways in general is Lamar Jackson just continues to prove it time and time again for the Baltimore Ravens. I was high on this team coming into the season, and I maybe have a couple more trepidations with this defense than I did coming into the year, but this offense looks tremendous right now.
Yeah, I definitely. I remember the first time we sat here before the season started. You were very high on the Ravens, and I was not so sure. But I have slowly moved to the Lamar Jackson camp. And yeah, I mean, I think of week 3. I mean, the big takeaway for me is the fact that there was a lot of bad football. This was one of the worst weeks of football that I can remember. A lot of sloppy play from good quarterbacks, a lot of very poor coaching, I thought. Just in general, a very tough week to watch as an NFL fan. So Lamar, I definitely think, was a bright spot. I mean, Lamar and Jalen Hurts really, to me, were the only 2 quarterbacks that I thought played well. Some other ones, obviously Trevor Lawrence looked really good, and Geno Smith was pretty decent actually in a loss. But in general, I thought it was a very poor week for the NFL and for the star quarterbacks in our league.
I have a couple college basketball friends, and we sort of text back and forth with one another, and we were wondering, hey, I thought that the Big Ten contract with the NBC, that kicked in 2 years from now instead of tonight with that Broncos versus 49ers, just absolute disaster. And with the Broncos, they got the job done. They got the win. But at 2-1, I'm not impressed by this team at all. Russell Wilson does not look like the guy that we saw in Seattle. And I think that at this point, with regards to just that entire AFC West, not as impressed with them as I was coming into the year. Now, I want to check in on the health of Justin Herbert because that, no question, played a big role this week along with having no offensive line. But in terms of the AFC West, not as impressed by this division as I was coming into the year.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some question marks, really, with every team right now in the league. But I mean, I will say this Broncos 49ers game. I mean, it's at football back years. It was just really hard to watch. Obviously, if you watch the game or if you followed on Twitter, it was a tough one. I'm really surprised. I was really surprised, honestly, by the Niners. I mean, I thought Shanahan did a very poor job coaching. There was a very pivotal spot. It ended up being pretty pivotal when points were very important in this game. Early near the end of the first half, the Broncos committed a holding penalty, and it would have been 3rd and 17 back on the other side of midfield. And instead, Shanahan decided to decline the penalty, give him a 4th and 6, and the Broncos kicked a 54-yarder. I mean, in the altitude, that's really not that hard for McManus, I think. And at that point, Wilson hadn't shown the possibility of being able to pick up a 3rd and 16. And ultimately, those 3 points came back to haunt them. I mean, obviously, games play out different, but I mean, that was very costly, and I don't even really know what their game plan was in San Francisco. I mean, Russ looked terrible, but San Francisco wasn't very impressive either. I mean, Jimmy G, we thought we were going to get a much better Niners unit, with continuity that we got with Jimmy G. They were very dysfunctional today.
And Jimmy G pulled a good old Dan Orlovsky, which Dan was having a good time with that on Twitter, where he stepped on the end line in the end zone, which that was a safety, and game was decided by 1 point. Those 2 points, they were the difference in the game as well. And now I think that you just got a lot of intrigue in general in terms of both the AFC and the NFC, because I think everyone going in had the Buffalo Bills as the top team in not just the AFC, but the NFL. They fall, but I don't think that they looked terrible in this game by any stretch of the imagination. I thought that this was a little bit more credit where credit is due to the Miami Dolphins, but it just feels like everything's open right now. I don't think that you could be like, yep, this team is legitimately the best team in the league, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I think that if you're having one team as a demonstrative favorite in the futures market, it's a disservice because it just feels like it's as open this year as it's been in a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, the NFL is a week-to-week league. I mean, it's not college football. I mean, Georgia rolls out the helmets every week, and they're gonna cover the 35-point spread they put out there. So that's not how the NFL works. I mean, we have a very balanced league, and even some of the biggest mismatches sometimes come down to just a couple plays. I mean, I still think that it's Buffalo head and shoulders above the rest. This was a very poor performance, I thought, by Josh Allen. I mean, his stats look good, and they move the ball up and down, but
you can't have him throw 63 times.
He just had some very questionable clock management things, and they were very poor around the goal line. If you look at that last series, I mean, credit to the Dolphins. I mean, they did stop them. They had a 1st and goal at the 2. Josh Allen, he runs the first one, and then the next 3, they just run all the receivers out. And I didn't really see the patented, bootleg Josh Allen, get him on the outside, see if he can make a guy miss, draw in the defender, and then, dump it over his head to Diggs or anything like that. I mean, they just had the receivers go out and just kind of run around, and like none of those passes were even close. On 3rd down, he kind of bounced it out to Isaiah McKenzie, but I'm not even sure if he fires that one in there, if it gets in. But my real question about the Buffalo Bills-Miami Dolphins game is, how did Tua get to play the second half? That was the most perplexing thing I've seen in the NFL in years. I mean, we've seen receivers and running backs get hit, and they go out, and they're out with a concussion. And he literally stumbled and fell. They picked him up, and he fell again. He shook his head out, like trying to clear the cobwebs. I mean, that was the most obvious concussion I've seen, and I don't know what happened there, but there should be some fines levied, and that could have swayed the power in the AFC East, because I don't think Teddy Two Gloves is going to get it done versus the Bills.
Yep, and no question, you could do worse at a backup quarterback spot than Teddy Bridgewater. No offense or buts about it. I'm a Green Bay Packers fan, and I would much rather see Teddy Bridgewater take over for Aaron Rodgers rather than Jordan Love, who they've got right now, but that's not great. And as a matter of fact, you're not the only one that wants to see a little bit more. The NFLPA is going to be reviewing the concussion protocols with Tua and everything like that, and I do think that it's important to take a look at for this next week as well, because going into week 4, I think it's fair to be questionable about the Miami Dolphins and taking a look at some look-at lines. If you think that perhaps he might be out, that could be a way to look as well, because with this Tua situation, you know that it's going to be blowing up all week long, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on the Miami Dolphins medical staff to really review this, because I'm in agreement with you. I have no idea how he returned so quickly.
Yeah, that Thursday night game is very intriguing with the Dolphins against the Bengals. I mean, 2 teams that definitely have aspirations beyond the regular season. So let's see if Tua's going to play first of all, and really I want to take a look more at what the Dolphins' defensive line looks like. I mean, I think the Bengals are going to be good versus teams like the Jets that aren't able to get pressure on them, but if the Dolphins are able to get pressure, I mean, that offensive line still was letting, even though the Jets' D-line is pretty porous, I mean, I guess the D-line's not porous, but it's just not that tough. I don't know if this revamped Cincinnati offensive line is as good as we might have thought it was in the offseason.
And I'm so glad that you bring up the Bengals as well, because they get the job done. They take down the New York Jets by kind of 27-12, but anything worse than that, in my opinion, would have been, well, not great to say the least for the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Bengals aren't looking bad on defense. I think that we can agree there. The Bengals' problems have not been on defense, but they've been rather on offense, and I don't know if I saw enough out of the Bengals' offense in Week 3 to think, oh yes, they've got everything rectified and they're back to their Super Bowl form of last year.
Yeah, this Bengals team's they're gonna have a lot of games where they're gonna win. They're gonna win a lot of games this year. They're a good team. They've got great skill position players. They just need to tighten up that offensive line a little bit. The defense is good. They need to avoid the turnovers and the sacks. I mean, really, when it comes down to it, they could be 3-0 if they could block and hold on to the football.
And when it comes to that Bengals versus Dolphins game that we're going to be seeing on Thursday as well, we were mentioning if there might be a little bit of a move in the line. A lot of look-at lines. They were between right around -1.5 to -2 on the Bengals going into Sunday. Now I've seen that move to -3 across the board. So it seems as though there might be a little bit of something in the grapevine brewing there. And there is a lot that is going down in the NFC as well. We've got to talk about that next, as David Baker is going to be hanging with me on the desk for that here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Being rejoined at the desk by David Baker, the 2020 Westgate SuperContest winner, and a man that he makes his living playing professional poker and does very well at it. And let's take a look at the NFC, as we talked a lot in that last segment about the AFC. And I'll pose the question for you right now. We're not going to back off here. Are the Eagles right now the best team in the NFC? Because the more I look at them, the more I like them. Now, the Commanders, not necessarily the world's greatest team, but the way that the Eagles came out on Sunday was very impressive, especially coming off of a short week.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have spoken every Sunday of this year, and from preseason, week 1, week 2, and I'll say week 3. I mean, I think the Eagles are the best team in the NFC right now. I said it before. I thought that they were one of the 2 or 3 best teams before the season, and each week I've kind of strengthened that position. The thing about the Eagles is the lines don't sleep. Like, you know, sometimes you have a team and their skill position players or whatever, they kind of go through a sleepy week. I mean, the Chiefs kind of had a sleepy week versus the Colts. The offensive and defensive lines don't sleep. If you're stronger, if you're more physical, if you're tougher, you're just gonna outwork your opponent, and that's just what the Eagles do. The Eagles outwork their opponents. That was a very, very impressive defensive performance by the Eagles. Yes, it's Carson Wentz, somebody that, I mean, if you followed me at all since the beginning of his career, that I've been down on. I don't like Carson Wentz. Never thought he was good. But, I mean, they put up 30 points on the Jags, or they put up 25, 30 points on Detroit. I mean, and they put up 2 on the Eagles. And it was just a complete dominating performance. And offensively, I was not in camp Jalen Hurts, the last few years. But, the thing about him is you can tell that guy has work ethic, and he tries and he listens and he gets better. And look, you aren't necessarily who you are today. That you don't have to be that guy tomorrow. And Jalen Hurts is a perfect example. Yes, we have opinions on these players and who they are today. That doesn't mean that they're always going to be that way. So, you have to be willing, I think, as a sports bettor or, just somebody who talks about sports, that you have to be willing to change your opinion when the guys give you the opportunity to do so. And Jalen Hurts has done that. I love A.J. Brown, and I thought that he was a key loss for the Titans. I backed the Titans last year a lot because I think he does a lot to open up the offense. And Brown has done that for Hurts. He's done that for Devontae Smith. He's done that for Goddard. And, yeah, this Eagles team's clicking. So right now I think they're the best team in the NFC, and we'll see how the season plays out. We're week 3, so, I mean, we're a long way from crowning a champ. But, I mean, they're going to be in it for a while for sure. And
I am so glad that you're bringing that up about Jalen Hurts as well, because something that I spent my time talking about in the first segment of the show is it feels like there's now finally that passing of the torch when it comes to quarterbacks. Now, 1 or 2 have been bowing out year in and year out, starting with like Peyton Manning, and then Drew Brees retires, and you've got sort of that going on. But it feels like Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, from what we saw on Sunday, yeah, Aaron Rodgers still probably a little bit ahead of Tom Brady, but it feels like these guys aren't the upper echelon of the upper echelon anymore, and they're being replaced by someone that we talked about a little bit earlier in Lamar Jackson. Jalen Hurts is starting to bust out. Don't know if I could quite get to him being a top 3 MVP candidate yet, but certainly my opinion of Jalen Hurts from just what it was 3 weeks ago has went up astronomically. Josh Allen has obviously formed himself. You're able to go down the list, and I feel like in terms of the quarterback hierarchy, we've really got to be reevaluating it, because the normal names that we see at the top, they're not those guys, and now some of the guys that are a little bit younger, I feel like they're replacing them and taking that mantle.
I mean, yes, I do agree that quarterbacks are ascending, but to me, there are 3 parts of a quarterback. You've got the lower body, which Lamar and Jalen have, the ability to run, and Kyler. You've got the arm strength and the ability to fit the ball in tight windows and make all the throws that you need to make. And then you have the brain. And, people who have argued against Tom Brady for years, He's not as skilled as Aaron Rodgers. He's not as skilled as Patrick Mahomes. He's the smartest quarterback that there's ever been in the NFL. And so, yes, these quarterbacks have the skill sets, maybe more than Brady and to some extent Rodgers, but I'm not ready to fully take, the GOATs off the pedestal yet. Yes, they played a tough game today, and the game was very sloppy, didn't look good, but I mean, Brady has no offensive line. He's got receivers that, Russell Gage was a number 3, number 4 option for the Atlanta Falcons that have stunk the last few years. They got Beasley, who was nobody wanted to sign. They have Scotty Miller, who was like 5th round. Brashard Perryman, 3rd, 4th receiver for the Jets. I'm not ready to just throw, Let me see what Brady's got with Evans, Godwin, and Julio. If maybe they can get somebody on this offensive line healthy. I'm not ready to bury Brady and Rodgers yet. But yes, I agree that some of these young guys have definitely raised their game and they're moving up towards the upper echelon.
And speaking of that Packers versus Buccaneers game as well, if you watch the game, I felt like Tom Brady was a better quarterback in that spot. He took what the defense gave him, to your point. He really didn't have a lot of receivers around him to make plays in general. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers don't lose that game if Perryman doesn't fumble not once but twice. They recovered one of them, and then there was another wide receiver that fumbled on the team as well. I think it might have been Gage that had that other fumble as well. And I felt like Tom Brady played actually well enough to win that game. And I think that out of the two quarterbacks, I was honestly a little bit more impressed by Tom Brady, and I think that once the receivers come back, this is still a very formidable Buccaneers team that is going to be able to win a double-digit amount of games.
Yeah, the Bucs are gonna go as far as their offensive line can take them. If you give Brady time, he can still make the throws. Where he has the receiving core on the roster to get the job done. Even this receiving core, as bad as they are and were, like, Brady's still going to find them in space. He's still going to, matriculate the ball down the field. But Brady did make a very un-Brady-like decision and ultimately cost them their best opportunity to tie the game. And you cannot take a delay a game before the 2-point conversion. That's something that Brady
with the timeout on top of it.
Brady's probably never done that in his career, and I don't think, we probably won't ever see him do something like that either. Again.
Yep, I do think that was a critical error, but at the same time, he put the team in a position to be able to win as well, and I think that is so important. And when it comes to something that you were talking about a little bit earlier, the skill set players just having a little bit of a rough week in general for the Kansas City Chiefs, I thought that this was an intriguing spot, and one that we talked about a little bit earlier as well, between the Colts and the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs, they fall to the Indianapolis Colts by a count of 20-17, but this was not a loss that I really downgraded the Chiefs for at all. I feel like this was just more the Indianapolis Colts showing that, yep, we're not that team from the first 2 weeks that completely stunk. We should not be completely out of this. And I do think that for the Colts, it was a very important win because out of all the divisions, I think that the AFC South is the weakest in the NFL. Now, Jacksonville Jaguars are starting to raise up, and for the Houston Texans, they're not as pathetic as they were last season, but I think in a very winnable division, this was a must-have game for the Indianapolis Colts, and they got it.
Yeah, this football game, if you're betting NFL, there's never been a more obvious play than the Colts this week. You ask every casual football person, and every one of them, the Colts just lost 24-0 versus the Jags. The Chiefs are coming off of a long week. They had that mini bye by playing on Thursday. They're going to go in there and they're going to stomp them. The line opened at 6.5. Oh, that's easy. That's nothing. Wait, it got bet down to 6. It got bet down to 5.5. It got bet down to 5. It went off at 4.5. Why do you think that is? That's because there's major money. All the tickets are coming in on the Chiefs because that's what all the casual people are thinking, and yet the line is just moving 2 points off of the number against the public team. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but, that's just the biggest red flag you can have in betting is a situation like that, and I hope people out there took advantage of it and did play the Colts.
And hopefully you didn't overreact as well, because, I mean, just 3 weeks ago, we were talking about the Colts being the top team in the division, and then we were just completely writing them off in this game, which we should not have. But something else that we've got to take a look at, a few Week 4 games, and tie bowl around Week 3 with David Baker next, right here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Being rejoined by 2020 SuperContest champion and professional poker player David Baker. And David, we've been recapping a lot of these games for Week 3, but we've still got one that's coming up for Monday, the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants, with the Cowboys getting the tickets on them. They went from being right around 3 to 4 point underdogs down to a 1 point dog, and a total of anywhere between 39 and 39.5. With the Giants, they've been able to win 2 games. I mean, I haven't been impressed by them, but they've been able to win 2 games. And for the Dallas Cowboys, I honestly think that Cooper Rush is okay. I don't think they, by any stretch of the imagination, Dak Prescott or anything like that, but he's done a competent job, and I lean a little bit towards the Dallas Cowboys in the spot just because of their defense. I'm not sure if you've got any sort of a lean on this game, but I lean towards the Cowboys as long as they've got their normal guys, including Micah Parsons, who's dealing with an illness, in the game.
Yeah, I mean, this Monday, this is a pretty pivotal game, in my opinion. The Eagles obviously heads and shoulders above everybody else in that division, but as we know in the NFL, things change, and I think the winner of this game is the one that kind of stays within, earshot of the Eagles in case they have a couple injuries or they slip up, and also they get to play the Eagles a couple times. So I think the winner of this game is the one that is going to give them their most trouble. I'm kind of leaning towards the Giants. I definitely think they have a better coach. I've been high on Brian Daboll for years. I was kind of surprised that he didn't get a job the year before. I think the Giants made a terrific hire. I think Daniel Jones is a little better than Cooper Rush. A lot of times when you get these backup quarterbacks, sometimes they have a 1 week boost their first week in, and then you get a little more film on them, and some of their weaknesses and why their backup quarterbacks kind of get a little exposed. They got a better running game. The receivers kind of a push. I mean, the Cowboys have CeeDee, but obviously Michael Parsons is the big big X factor that the Cowboys have. Is he gonna blow up that Giants offense? I don't think either of these teams are built for the long haul, but they could be. Either the winner of this game could be frisky for a little while and contend for a wild card. I'm leaning towards the Giants, but it's definitely not one of my top plays of the week.
Yep, I can't blame you there, because this is a game that is relatively close to a pick'em. It's a 1 point line, and I can't necessarily disagree there. I give the Cowboys a little bit of an edge, but this is still one of these games that not necessarily one of the most rambunctious of the week. And then with the Dallas Cowboys obviously dealing with that illness right now to Micah Parsons, I do think that is very important to note. And speaking of what we saw from Week 3 in terms of an ailment, this happened very late in the game, and as a result, we've seen a big line move, and I always do think that it is important to take a look at these lines early on in the week, because the Green Bay Packers were in a lot of spots between a 6 to a 6.5 point favorite going into Sunday against the New England Patriots, and now that Mac Jones is officially listed as doubtful, probably not going to play, not completely ruled out, but looking relatively doubtful with a leg injury they sustained in the final, I would say, about 3 or so minutes of that game. This line has moved to 9.5. Do you agree with the amount of movement that we've seen? Because if Mac Jones is unable to play, which looks like he's not, it's most likely going to be Brian Hoyer that steps in for him.
Yeah, I definitely think that Mac's not my favorite quarterback, and I was very low on the Patriots. I've been low on him. But Brian Hoyer, I think he's basically there to hold the clipboard and help coach Mac up. So I can't imagine that he has much athleticism left, and he didn't really have much of an arm before when he was younger. So I think the Patriots are definitely outclassed here, but it could be a letdown spot for the Packers coming in off of beating Tom Brady, coming home, playing a team that they should probably cakewalk over. Also, I'm not sure the Packers are built to blow teams out in their current model. So I'm not sure where I'm going to fall on this line, but I definitely think that Mac's worth 3 points, even though he's not really that. He's not elite, but I got to think Brian Hoyer's in the bottom groupings of backups in the league.
And to your point, very strange that I'd be taking a look at Packers versus Patriots, see a 42 on the board, and think, yeah, you know what, there might be a little bit of value on the under because Packers have yet to get to 24 points this season. With the Patriots, they were moving the ball a little bit against the Baltimore Ravens, but they've been relatively lackluster themselves. So I think that is something important to note. And then a team that you were talking to me about a little bit off air, that'd be the Cleveland Browns. They're going to be on the road against the Atlanta Falcons. They're 3-point favorites in this spot. And with the Cleveland Browns, I actually like what I'm seeing out of Jacoby Brissett. They last played on Thursday Night Football, so for a lot of people taking a look at things on Sunday, they're a little bit out of sight, out of mind, and I sort of like it that way because with the Falcons, they go to Seattle and get the job done, but even with them winning that game, I just have not been impressed by the Falcons whatsoever, and with the Browns, I think that this is a team that is going to be able to continue to play solid defense, and with Brissett in the fold, they're not necessarily the flashiest team, but I think that Brissett is capable of keeping this team in the playoff hunt until Deshaun Watson comes back.
Yeah, I like this Cleveland Browns team. I like what I see. A lot like what we talked about with the Eagles earlier. They're built in the trenches. I like teams that are built in the trenches. They have a great running game, and I think if they can stay competitive, I mean, take the off-field stuff off from Watson, I still think he's, an elite top 5 quarterback. I'm going to assume that he's going to come back similar to how he left. So if this team can go into Week 13 somewhere in the 8-4 range, I think they have some value in the futures market. I'm not really sure what the prices are right now, but I would definitely look at them. I think this might be a good week to actually look at them because the Ravens have the Bills and the Bengals have the Dolphins. So there's a chance that the two other teams in that division could lose. And I think the Browns probably beat the Falcons. I mean, obviously, I think this is going to be a spot that the public's going to like the Falcons. Just in general, teams like that, spunky teams, young teams, easy to root for teams.
They got straight covers for the Falcons, too.
Yeah, they got Drake London. They have Kyle Pitts. They have a fun team. And nobody likes the Browns. Brissett doesn't get anybody excited. People are mad at them for signing Watson. Nobody likes a running game. We all like, the dynamic quarterbacks and the dynamic pass catchers, but it's a workman-like team, and Brissett's a workman-like quarterback, and I could see them just dominating the line of scrimmage against the Falcons. And if they win, and I anticipate the Bills will probably beat the Ravens, if the Bengals lose to the Dolphins, then now you've got a Bengals team, a Browns team, in first place in the division, a third of the way through the suspension. So I think there could be some value in the Browns' future markets.
Yep, and I always think that there's value in taking a look at this as well. We're going to have the Vikings and the Saints playing in Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, so they're going across the pond to play this one with the Saints being a 2.5-point underdog. Not necessarily bullish on the Saints, and whenever I take a look at these games, they're played in London / just outside the United States in general. Most of these stadiums, they are not built for football, and I typically lean towards the under, seeing a total of 43.5 with the Vikings being a 2.5-point favorite. Any initial lean on this?
Yeah, I haven't capped the game yet, but I will say that I do like the Vikings. If you followed me at all or you've watched the show the previous weeks, I'm high on the Vikings this year. They really weren't impressive today, and obviously they laid an egg against the Eagles. But I still think that I think the Vikings have a little bit of what it takes. Is this considered a primetime game for Kurt because it might be nighttime over there in Europe? I don't know. But I don't really like what I'm seeing out of the Saints at all. Jameis looks clearly hobbled, and this is not the best version of Jameis we have. Although, Olave is looking really strong, and Michael Thomas, and, they still have the skill position players. I'm looking forward to the game. There's a lot of great skill position players. You're going to have probably 6, 7, 8 guys that, you're going to have in your fantasy lineups, if you play fantasy football from this game. So this is a game. This isn't the Jacksonville, Tennessee game where I'm not going to set the alarm for 6:30. I'll be up 6:30 a.m. watching this one.
I will be as well. And our VSiN Pro tip for this hour, you're able to get them all at vsin.com/subscribe. Don't be afraid to wait on firing it on a game to get the best information possible on something. We were talking about it with the Micah Parsons illness. Want to make sure that he's in before you fire in one way or the other. But we always want to fire in on David Baker because you do absolutely terrific work, my friend. Thank you so much for joining me here on VSiN.
Thank you.
We're going to be talking a little NFL next here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.